I am firmly on the side of Lord of the Rings. It is the greatest fantasy epic of all time. And I think for a couple of different reasons, but I want to focus on a big one for me, which is the humanity with which Lord of the Rings approaches its story. It is a classic tale of good versus evil. It is a classic quest story. I would say classic in the sense that, like, when it came out, it revolutionized the way fantasy, like it made high fantasy a genre, like, period.
I completely agree. I think Lord of the Rings is, like, undoubtedly the OG. They are to which we owe the success of this genre. Like, Lord of the Rings walked so Game of Thrones could run. But what Game of Thrones did was build upon what Lord of the Rings started.
Right into a swamp and sink deep in the depths of the muck.
Game of Thrones is like one of the most epic television shows of all time. It's broken its own records time and time again. And if we want to get into the story of Game of Thrones, what Game of Thrones did was transcend genre and bring in all of these different demographics of people that would never have liked or even given fantasy the time of day. The New York Times, like, notably panned Game of Thrones in the beginning, and even they, by the end, were turned around. And that's because the scope of the plot of the show is unbelievable. The characters are unbelievable. And in my opinion, what it does best is have women rulers. That final battle in Game of Thrones is two queens.
And I would give you that, I would think that Game of Thrones features certainly more women than Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings doesn't have a lot of women, especially the books. I mean, they beefed them up a little bit in the films. I would also say that the characters are just... Game of Thrones is just a sea of gray. It doesn't matter who you are, man or woman, like, all the characters are sort of treated equally in this way, where they're all almost pretty reprehensible people, except for a few, like Ned Stark and Jon Snow and Daenerys at the beginning, and then she...
At the beginning.
It's all about how deep, how just despicable can we make these people? How depressing can we make it?
It's a larger message of, like, how power can corrupt. I think
but
it's okay
if we're going to talk about that, Lord of the Rings did that brilliantly years ago. Lord of the Rings is about that same thing. The One Ring is this symbol of ultimate power, and it puts it in the hands of the most, as the books say, the most unlikely creatures imaginable, in the hands of the hobbits. First Bilbo, then Frodo. And Lord of the Rings, in and of itself, is about how power can corrupt. And the powerful in Lord of the Rings, the wizards, the knights, the elves, they can't take the burden of this ultimate weapon, because if they do, they know they're going to fall to it. Or maybe they don't know and they try to go after it anyway.
At the end of the day, it's just one storyline. Game of Thrones grew over 8 years with so many storylines. It's just the scope of it. I just think there's no comparison. It's like one story done artfully well, or multiple storylines done at an epic scale incredibly well.